If you can play this piano better than a professional, I'll marry you." That sentence didn't just echo across the gala hall, it detonated. It was said with a smirk, in a room full of people who didn't expect to be challenged. They were there to drink champagne, to pose for flashbulbs, to network and congratulate themselves. Not to witness history. But history doesn't ask permission. And in that exact moment, it turned its gaze toward a man standing near the back, unnoticed by most, unwanted by some. His name? Jordan Blake. A 34-year-old black entrepreneur with the kind of posture that makes you look twice, even when he's doing nothing at all. Tailored, charcoal suit. No tie. Calm hands. Kind eyes. A man who didn't need to speak to fill a space. He wasn't invited to be part of the story that night. But the story had other plans. Alyssa Kensington, daughter of the billionaire CEO and face of the luxury watch empire hosting the event, tossed that dare in his direction like it was part of the show. Most people thought she was joking. A few laughed. Until Jordan stepped forward. Not fast. Not angry. Just deliberate. And when he reached the stage, he didn't argue, didn't flex, didn't perform. He looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Say it again. In front of everyone. And keep your word." The room got quiet. Not out of fear. But because somewhere inside, everyone knew, this was no longer a joke. Jordan wasn't a valet. He wasn't a background extra. And when his hands touched the piano, he didn't just play. He testified. The live stream, still rolling. The audience, about to shift from laughing to breathless. Because when dignity walks into the room through music, it doesn't knock. It just plays. And for the next few minutes, Jordan Blake wouldn't just challenge a billionaire's dare, he'd challenge an entire culture to think twice about who we overlook. Jordan Blake was never one for the spotlight. He had no viral quotes, no flashy interviews, no viral TED Talks. You wouldn't find his face on a billboard in Silicon Valley, and he didn't post thought leader threads on X or share espresso selfies with motivational captions. Jordan preferred building over branding. And yet, at just 34, he was the CEO of one of the fastest growing private equity tech firms in the country. JBX Capital. A company designed not just to invest in startups, but to specifically empower young entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds. Black founders, first-gen immigrants, single moms, formerly incarcerated innovators, people whose ideas were solid, but whose zip codes, accents, or skin tone had gotten them turned away from the boardroom. That was Jordan's mission. Quiet power. He graduated top of his class from Howard University, then turned down 6 offers from top-tier firms because he believed in something different: ownership. Generational equity. Teaching communities to build wealth from within, instead of asking permission from institutions built to exclude them. But before all of that, before the suits and the pitch decks and the board meetings, there was something else. Music. Jordan Blake had been a child prodigy. By age 10, he was playing Chopin nocturnes with a control and sensitivity that made grown pianists stop mid-sentence. His mother, a nurse who worked double shifts, saved for 5 years to buy him a second-hand upright piano. And Jordan, he treated it like gold. He studied under Ms. Evelyn Carr, a retired concert pianist known for her ruthless standards and tender heart. She used to say, "Jordan doesn't just play notes. He listens to the silence between them." But life doesn't always follow the music. When his mother got sick during his senior year, Jordan dropped out of Juilliard to take care of her. Medical bills swallowed his savings. The piano was sold. The music went quiet. He never stopped hearing it. He just stopped believing the world had space for his sound. So he turned his mind toward finance, toward strategy, toward legacy. Until that night in Beverly Hills, when a stranger dared him in front of the world, and the silence inside him finally had something to say. Alyssa Kensington had been raised in a world where velvet ropes were not barriers, they were signals to wave her through. Daughter of Arthur Kensington, founder and CEO of Kensington & Company, the luxury watch empire based in New York and Los Angeles, Alyssa had grown up in a bubble of private schools, seasonal galas, and first-class boarding gates. Every step she took was cushioned by legacy. Every mistake, absorbed by her father's PR machine. She was sharp. No one could deny that. With degrees in marketing and strategic branding, Alyssa was more than just the face of the Kensington name, she was its voice. Every advertisement, every luxury launch, every social media campaign bore her fingerprints. But she was also known for something else. Her temper. Not explosive. Not loud. But icy. She had perfected the art of public dismissal. The side glance, the raised brow, the smile that said you were seen, and still unworthy. It wasn't always intentional. It was learned. When you grow up being told you're the standard, it becomes easy to see everyone else as below it. What most people didn't know was that Alyssa had once been a pianist, too. Years ago, before the brand deals and press briefings, she had studied classical piano with discipline and fire. She loved the craft, the rigor, the structure, the way a piece could speak for you when words failed. But her journey ended at 17 after a disastrous public recital. Critics called her technical, cold, precise, but lacking soul. That night, something in her broke. She quit, packed her sheet music into a box and told herself she had outgrown music. In truth, she never forgave the audience for not applauding loud enough. She learned that image was safer than vulnerability. And from then on, she controlled every story before anyone else could. So when she saw Jordan standing near the back of the Beverly Hills Gala, dressed simply, observing quietly, she assumed he was staff. And when she tossed out that challenge, "If you can play this piano better than a professional, I'll marry you," she meant it to entertain, to dismiss, to remind the room who owned the stage. She never expected him to step forward. She never expected him to play. And she certainly never expected the next 5 minutes to unravel everything she thought she knew about control. At first, it felt like nothing more than another Kensington moment, a staged remark, a playful jab designed to stir up a few laughs and keep the cameras rolling. After all, the room was filled with influencers, investors, and high-profile guests, most of whom had built their careers off soundbites and spectacle. The event was being streamed live to over 14 million viewers worldwide. Banners with Kensington and Company as logo hung like crowns above a glowing Steinway grand piano, centered on a stage flanked by LED walls and polished marble. Alyssa stood in the middle of it all, dressed in a midnight blue gown, diamonds flickering at her wrist, glass of champagne in hand. "If you can play this piano better than a professional," she said, voice just loud enough for the cameras to catch every word, "I'll marry you." The crowd chuckled. Some sipped their drinks. Others looked around, unsure whether this was scripted. But then something strange happened. Jordan Blake didn't laugh. He didn't step back. He stepped forward. With a quiet calm that silenced even the most talkative guest, he made his way toward the piano, his steps unhurried, his expression unreadable. Cameras pivoted, tracking his movement. Viewers at home zoomed in. Some typed comments. Others took screenshots. Alyssa's smile faltered, not completely, but enough for the shift to be noticed by the live stream audience. "What's happening?" a reporter whispered. "This isn't a setup," someone else replied. Jordan stopped just short of the piano. He looked directly at Alyssa, his voice even, controlled. "Say it again," he said, loud enough for the microphones. "Say it clearly. And keep your word." The gala's host, standing nearby, glanced nervously toward the production team. The crowd didn't move. Phones were lifted. Faces locked in. And in that moment, the tone of the entire night flipped. What was meant to be a light-hearted PR stunt had become something else entirely. An unscripted reckoning, live in front of millions. A billionaire's daughter had made a dare. And the man she tried to dismiss was about to turn that dare into a declaration. Not for marriage, but for respect. And there was no script to protect her now. Jordan said nothing as he approached the Steinway. He ran one hand gently along the edge of the polished lid, letting his fingers absorb the quiet power beneath it. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't need to. He knew they were watching. He pulled out the bench slowly, sat down, and adjusted his posture the way his teacher used to remind him. Feet grounded, spine straight, shoulders down. His hands hovered above the keys. And then, without introduction, without flourish, he began. Claire de Lune. A piece as old as memory. As delicate as breath. The first few notes floated through the air like mist across a still lake. A light, deliberate touch. Nothing showy. Just sound, pure, clean, familiar, but played with the weight of 1,000 untold stories behind it. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. The clinking of glasses faded. Even the camera crews, trained to keep moving, stood still for a second too long. The music wasn't loud. It was honest. Every note landed with intention, yet carried a softness that wrapped around the room like a memory you didn't know you had until you heard it again. He played not to impress, but to remember, Himself, his mother, the sound of piano keys under dim light in a modest apartment where hope came in the form of melody. People leaned forward without realizing it. The same hands that wrote contracts, closed deals, and held champagne flutes now trembled just a little, stilled by the sound of something they couldn't measure. Alyssa stood frozen. She had played this piece once. She remembered struggling to control its phrasing, to keep the right hand light without sounding hollow. Jordan, somehow, had given it both weight and air. At the edge of the crowd, Eli Tran, a respected music critic, whispered almost involuntarily, "That touch. That restraint. This is not hobby-level talent." Jordan reached the final phrase, held the last chord, not long, not dramatically, just long enough. Then he lifted his hands slowly. No bow. No smile. Just silence. A full, deep silence that told the room it had changed. And just like that, the man they laughed at had turned their attention into reverence, using nothing but memory, music, and a name they had yet to say out loud. The final note of Claire de Lune had barely faded when the murmurs began. Soft at first, then building. Not the kind of noise you hear after a performance. This was not applause. It was confusion mixed with curiosity, the quiet panic of people realizing they had just witnessed something they could not categorize. People began whispering names, asking questions under their breath. Who is he? Does anyone know? The cameras were still rolling. The live stream chat exploded. Viewers typed furiously. Who is this man? Did she just challenge a professional? Within seconds, someone in the room pulled out their phone, typed Jordan Blake into a search bar, and stopped breathing for a moment. Then came the ripple. A whisper from the left side of the room floated out. He is not staff. He is the CEO of JBX Capital. A louder voice added from the back. That is Jordan Blake, the tech investor. The energy in the room changed instantly. Measured. Embarrassed. People who had overlooked him earlier stood a little taller. Some reached for their phones. Others looked down, silently hoping the cameras had not caught their earlier reactions. The name passed from mouth to mouth. Jordan Blake. Black Founder. Multi-million-dollar investor. Quiet builder of opportunity. A man whose silence carried more power than most people's headlines. Eli Tran, the music critic, stepped forward and nodded slowly. Now it makes sense, he said. His phrasing, the way he used the pause. That was not performance. That was speech. At the center of it all, Alyssa Kensington remained still. Her polished expression began to crack. Her father's PR training kicked in, framed the moment, reclaimed the narrative. But it was already gone. The live stream chat surged with messages. Jordan Blake. Keep your word. He played. The moment had left the stage. It now belonged to the world. And in that world, Jordan Blake was no longer a mystery man in the shadows. He was a reminder that dignity does not ask for attention. And sometimes, the most powerful person in the room is the one you did not bother to look at. The music had stopped, but the tension in the room had not. Alyssa stood still, her fingers wrapped tightly around the stem of her champagne glass. The camera lights had softened, but the pressure had not. All eyes were still on her, waiting for the next move. Jordan Blake did not speak right away. He stepped down from the stage, calm, measured, composed. He was not looking for applause. He was looking for clarity. They met near the edge of the hall, just out of the spotlight but still within the circle of attention. Alyssa looked at him, the polished mask she wore since childhood beginning to slip. That was not what I expected, she said quietly. What did you expect? Jordan replied. That I would laugh it off. Walk away. Stay in the role you assigned me. Alyssa opened her mouth to speak, but hesitated. She had never been the one without control in a conversation. I was trying to be funny, she said, trying to recover. The words sounded weaker than she intended. That was not a joke, Jordan said. Not to me. Not to the people who saw it and heard what it meant. You turned a stranger into a spectacle because you thought you could. His voice did not rise. He did not need to shout. It was the steadiness of it that made her blink. I did not know who you were, Alyssa admitted. That is the point, Jordan answered. You never asked. There was a pause. A beat of silence. And in that space, something shifted in her face. The beginning of understanding. What do you want from me? She asked. Nothing you cannot give, he said. But if you meant what you said, if there is even a part of you that believes in keeping your word, then let us set the terms properly. You want a marriage, she said, half smiling, still trying to regain ground. No, he replied. I want your word. And I want you to honor it the right way. Not through publicity. Through action. She looked at him, the music still ringing in her memory. The crowd was still close, but in that moment, all she could hear was his voice. And for the first time in a long time, Alyssa Kensington listened without thinking of what to say next. The second performance did not begin with applause. It began with breath. Jordan Blake sat down at the Steinway once more, but this time, he paused longer than before. His hands rested gently on the keys, but he did not play right away. The room had gone quiet again, not because someone asked it to, but because it knew something sacred was about to happen. He had chosen not a famous piece, not something from a European composer or a grand classical canon. He was about to play something of his own. A piece he wrote years ago but never performed. A personal composition he called a prayer for the forgotten. The first note was low, full, carried by his left hand with the weight of memory. Then came the slow rising harmony, his right hand building it layer by layer like a house made from old stories and unspoken names. It was not just music. It was history. It was the sound of generations who had worked in silence, who had built schools, churches, homes, and railways, only to be erased from the photographs. It was the voice of janitors and maids, teachers who were never promoted, musicians who never got the stage, students who dropped out to take care of sick parents, mothers who had no audience but never stopped singing. Jordan did not look at anyone as he played. He was not performing for the crowd. He was remembering for them. The melody blended jazz, gospel, and classical technique with such seamless care that it felt like you were hearing something older than music itself. He moved between tension and release like someone holding grief and dignity in the same breath. Alyssa stood still near the side of the stage. Her fingers, once tightly held around her champagne glass, were now open, relaxed at her sides. She was not the only one listening differently this time. In the back, a security guard stood straighter. Near the catering table, a server quietly wiped her eye. One of the donors whispered, "My God, this is beautiful." And then, as the final chord faded, Jordan let his hands fall gently into his lap. No bow. No signal. Just stillness. The room was full of people. But for the first time that night, it also felt full of presence. A prayer had been played. And every person there had heard it in their own name. The room remained silent long after the final note. When Jordan stood from the bench, he did not smile. He simply placed the piano lid down with care, as if closing a chapter only he had read. The stillness held for a moment longer, suspended like breath. Then Alyssa Kensington stepped forward. Not onto the stage, but beside it. No spotlight. No script. Just a microphone in one hand and a truth she could no longer avoid in the other. She looked out at the crowd, executives, investors, influencers, her father's colleagues, and hundreds of thousands still watching online. Her voice, when it came, was clear but softer than anyone had heard from her before. I was wrong. There was no spin. No corporate phrasing. No if I offended. Just 3 words that changed the tone of the entire evening. I judged someone not by who they were, but by who I assumed they could not be. She paused, then added, Jordan Blake did not ask for fame tonight. He asked me to keep my word. So I will. She turned slightly toward him and nodded. First, I am announcing the Jordan Blake Music Fund, a grant program that will support music education for underrepresented youth across the country. This is not a headline. It is a resource. And it starts with $1 million. The crowd murmured. Second, Kensington & Co. will fund a series of free community concerts in neighborhoods we have historically overlooked. Music should not live only in boardrooms and ballrooms. Third, we will be reviewing and eliminating any internal policies that separate staff from guests, physically or socially. There will be no more rules that ask people to disappear behind service doors. She paused again, the air heavy with attention. And finally, I will take part in bias and empathy training alongside every member of our executive team. Not because it looks good, but because it is overdue. Jordan watched her closely. She was not performing. Not this time. She closed with a simple line. Tonight was not a PR crisis. It was a mirror. And I will not turn away from it. The applause did not erupt. It rose slowly, steadily, like something earned. And for the first time that evening, the Kensington name felt less like a brand, and more like a voice learning to mean what it said. Jordan Blake did not reach for the mic right away. He waited. He let Alyssa's words settle, not just in the air, but in the hearts of those listening. There was no need to rush. When you have waited years to be seen clearly, another few seconds feels like breath, not burden. Then he stepped forward. His voice was steady, calm. Not rehearsed, but ready. "I do not need a marriage," he said, looking gently in Alyssa's direction. "I never did." The crowd listened. "I never wanted this moment to become a spectacle. I did not play to prove something. I played because for the first time in a long time, I was asked to show who I am." He looked out into the audience, not at the front row, not at the donors, but toward the edges, where the servers stood, where security leaned silently near the walls, where the cleaning staff lingered just out of view. "I played for them too." He turned back to Alyssa. "You made a promise tonight, and you are choosing to keep it. Not with a ring, but with change. That means more to me than any applause." He paused, his tone sharpening just enough to be heard clearly. "But let us be honest. Dignity should not require a stage. It should not take a scandal for people to be respected. It should not take a challenge for someone to be called by their name." He glanced at the cameras, knowing the world was still watching. There are people across this country, at jobs, in schools, on sidewalks, who are being underestimated, misnamed, ignored. They do not need applause. They do not need praise. They need fairness. Jordan stepped back, letting the silence speak with him. Then he added one final thought. "We talk about equity in systems, but it starts with tone, with posture, with the moment you decide not to look past someone." He looked again at Alyssa, this time not as a critic, but as a peer. "You listened tonight. And that," he said, "is the beginning of something real." He nodded once. No bow. No grand gesture. Because dignity, he knew, does not ask for a show. It just asks to be met. By the next morning, the internet had already chosen its headline. From mocked to maestro. Clips of Jordan Blake's performance flooded social media. Millions of views poured in overnight. News anchors ran the footage on national broadcasts. Bloggers, podcasters, and opinion writers all had something to say. But most of all, people just shared it. No hashtags needed. Just the video. Just the moment. In group chats and comment sections, strangers wrote simple truths. "I have been Jordan. I have been overlooked. I have been mistaken for someone who does not belong." Teachers showed the performance in classrooms. Community centers replayed it during lunch breaks. Parents sent the link to their kids with messages that read, "This is what quiet confidence looks like." But the story did not stop with admiration. It sparked a wave of reckoning. Across industries, organizations began re-examining how they treat staff, how they define professionalism, how often they look past someone simply because of how they show up. Jordan's name trended not just because of what he played, but because of what it exposed. Media outlets called it a cultural reset. In one widely shared interview, a former Kensington employee said, "We were never allowed to walk through the front lobby. Watching that man stand on their stage felt like justice, for all of us." Alyssa Kensington, too, faced the weight of the moment. Her apology was replayed, dissected, praised, and criticized. But what mattered most was what came after. Kensington and Company officially launched the Jordan Blake Music Fund within 72 hours. Their website homepage changed. The faces in their marketing shifted. Internal policies were updated. Some said it was performative. Others said it was overdue. But few could deny it was happening. Meanwhile, Jordan remained quiet. He did not hold press conferences. He did not start a foundation in his name. He returned to his work, to his community, and to his music, now with one change. People had finally remembered how to listen. In a comment thread on the original live stream, someone wrote, "Respect should not be a reward. It should be the default." And thousands clicked like. Some stories end with applause. This one ends with reflection. Because what happened at the Kensington Gala was not just a feel-good moment or a viral performance. It was a reminder. A mirror held up to every room, every company, every community where dignity has been treated as optional. It began with a careless stare. A sentence tossed into a room full of wealth and power. "If you can play this piano better than a professional, I will marry you. But what came next was not a love story. It was a culture shift. It was a public promise forced into the light, and a private man who chose not to retaliate, but to reveal. And in doing so, he reminded all of us that the most powerful form of influence is not loud. It is not branded. It is not built for likes. It is built on integrity. Jordan Blake never asked for revenge. He asked for accountability. He did not shame. He did not shout. He simply played. And in doing so, he unlocked a silence many people had been sitting in their entire lives. It is easy to believe that respect must be earned. But the truth is, basic dignity should never be conditional. It should not depend on your job title, your skin tone, or your seat at the table. That is the real lesson. Not that talent can be hidden behind a quiet face, but that character can speak louder than money, than status, than legacy. So if you have ever been in a room where your voice felt too small, if you have ever been misjudged, overlooked, or called by a name that was not yours, remember this: you are not invisible, and you never were. The world may not always see your worth at first, but you do not need their permission to show it. Now we want to hear from you. Have you ever been in a moment where someone underestimated you? Or have you ever seen someone else be dismissed and wish you had spoken up? Share your story in the comments below. Let this space be more than a video. Let it be a conversation. And if this story moved you, even in a small way, hit like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more stories that challenge, uplift, and remind us of what really matters. Because in the end, keeping your word is not about promises made in public. It is about what you do when no one is watching. And that is where real change begins.